And then you got that, you saw this, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's all that's happened since you've been here. You know what I mean? Good job. Good job.
Okay, it is 4 o'clock. Everybody is here. We're dealing with that feedback issue. First of all, I call the meeting to order. And Ms. Thomas, would you call the roll, please?
Counselor Payne,
Here?
Counselor Pinkston,
Here.
Counselor Puryear,
Here.
Mayor Snook,
Here?
Vice Mayor Wade.
Here.
Okay, all here. Let's see, is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda? We have to have a motion to amend in this case. Somebody like to?
Yeah, I'd move to amend the agenda to include this new item here.
Is it? The
Allocation.
suggestion was, I move to amend and approve the agenda, adding a staff-recommended resolution as item number 17, allocation of funds from the Capital Improvement Program contingency account for the City Hall water leak repairs of $1.5 million.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Any
Aye.
opposed? The motion passes 5-0. This meeting will be divided, as always, into 3 main sections. First is a work session to hear and discuss presentations that do not require a council vote, and I should add, and will not have a council vote. Followed by a closed meeting to discuss and interview candidates for a few specific boards and commissions. Then the city council business meeting, which will begin around 6:30 p.m. And I should start off by saying, for those who either are here and wondering why we're here, or who are watching online and wondering why we're not in city council chambers, that there was a very interesting flood in Charlottesville City Council chambers over the weekend. Apparently a plumbing issue and all kinds of water every which way. City Hall is closed, and so we're here in city space, and everybody's just kind of faking it today. So, with that in mind, first item up is the Sister Cities Commission Annual Report. Edward Herring, Chair of the Sister Cities Commission, to present.
Good afternoon, Mayor Snook. Good afternoon, councilors. Mr. Rogers.
Good
Mrs.
afternoon.
Spelman. My name is Edward Herring, and I will be presenting the update for the Charlottesville Sister Cities Commission. Our annual report is normally due in June, but we did change our previous chairman. That was his last month of service, and therefore we were able to get a little bit of a delay. And now, we go to the technical part here. Okay, there we are. So with the Sister Cities, we're all familiar with the work we've been doing, but what we'd like to do is briefly, very, very briefly, go back and review just a little bit of this report today, the activities we have had in fiscal year 2023. Now, once again, our Sister Cities, just as a reminder of Poggio al Caino. Please note that I misspelled Caino, C-A-I, has an A-N-O there. And I think it's almost always the case that when you do something and you hit send on the computer, about 5 seconds later, you find your error. Which was our first sister city in 1976. Pleven in Bulgaria, which was a sister city since 2004, is in non-active status. In Bulgaria, the cities have been rearranged to some extent, so Pleven doesn't really exist in the way it did before. Besançon, of course, in France, our sister city since 2006. Winneba in Ghana, which we've been quite active with as a sister city since 2010. And lastly, Huehuetenango in Guatemala, which became a friendship city in July 1st, 2021, and is still in the exploratory phase. The commission members that have been working for the past year, several of them left in June at the end of their terms. We don't have any new ones coming to the commission yet. We hope to in September. But the list here, Allison Brown is our representative from the Charlottesville school system. Clara Denton Spalding is a commissioner at large. Nana Gotti, who has been on the commission several times, has been working with Winneba. Michael Grinnell is a treasurer. Kimberly Hayes is fairly new. She's been here half a year, and she's the business representative. Myself, Edward Herring, as the chairman, as well as the representative for the new city, which means Wayward Tenango. Stella Mattioli, who is at this moment still in Italy, working with Poggio. Sylvia Neustron has been with the commission about a year. Elizabeth Smiley has been with the commission 2 years. Elizabeth is the secretary as well as the representative to Bessensong. Our youth representative is Vivian Wong, who will be leaving us soon, as she has graduated from high school. Higher education is open, and I'm speaking with Ambassador Moe at this moment as to have a replacement. And of course, we have Maxilia Robinson as our staff liaison. Now, Bessensong will start there. Finally, after the pandemic, we were able to resume in-person exchanges with Bessensong. First week in April, Elizabeth Smiley traveled to Bessensong to renew links with the city. Now, this happened with several cities that between our last visit before the pandemic and now, the government changed. Friendly change in government. So a new government was elected, and so we started all new because, as with a lot of the European cities, all the different high offices are held by their particular mayors appointed officials. So our contacts and the people we've been working with for quite a few years, because the previous mayor was there for 17 years. So we're pretty well entrenched into the government. Now we're starting all over again. At the same time, Kimberly Hayes accompanied her on her own expense. She wanted to be there and help form an informal delegation. That coincided with a delegation from Charlottesville High School, which I was the chaperone for. And therefore, we had a mini delegation of 3 sister city commissioners in Bessensong, and we were able to work with them very, very closely. 2 highlights from that particular visit. One was the fact that because we had brand new contacts with a lot of new people, we, as a commission, hosted a dinner for 18 of the key people in Bessensong, both from the school system as well as from the city, and be able to reforge those ties, in addition to present Elizabeth as the contact person. Also, at the beginning of the visit, we were treated to a reception by the deputy mayor in the birthplace of Victor Hugo. And there was a presentation where we were able to present a nice letter from Mayor Snook, along with a gift, several gifts that we had found, and we were able to present those gifts to the vice mayor. On the right, you will see a photo of Elizabeth, and that is the vice mayor. And then on the left, you will see our 23 American students, Charlottesville High School students, along with about 20 students from their host students from Bessensong. And it was wonderful. I was caught off surprise and wound up translating both the French versions and English versions and all the speeches, and so it's like, okay, you could have warned me, but we got through it some sort of way without fracturing too many nerves. The next city is Poggio al Canio, and it's spelled correctly here. Stella Mattioli has been there for a few months, and she's worked to develop the relationships. With Poggio, the same thing with Bessensong, the entire city government changed. So there we are, started from scratch, building new relationships, and also coming up with new ways of doing things. Because anytime it does change, it gives us an opportunity to find new avenues to work together. One of the things that was very interesting is the fact that in Poggio, Charlottesville High School choir, led by Will Cook, was there on June 15th with a group to sing all over Italy, but especially in Poggio. And that funding, the travel was partially funded by the commission. On the left is Will Cook with the mayor of Poggio, and on the right is our group of students singing. I hope that you were able to see, I had sent out several weeks ago a YouTube of the students performing in Poggio. And I hope that you were able to see it. If not, I'll make sure you get to it. They did very, very well. We are very, very proud of them. We are very pleased with what they were able to do. Then we come to Winneba in Ghana. Now, we have a lot of activities because we are fortunate to have the Charlottesville Winneba Foundation in the city also. And this foundation has been very, very active as sort of a go-between between the governments of Winneba as well as working with the commission here. And Nana Gottlieb, who is our representative to Winneba, works closely with them, as well as former mayor and former commissioner Dave Norris. We have had quite a few delegations. This year, there was a 10th and 11th city delegation from Charlottesville to Winneba that we've had since 2010. We did provide some travel scholarship assistance for people to go there. And there are some other collaborations going on with Winneba, University of Virginia School of Architecture, the Helen Project, some initiatives supported by some of the grants from the Charlottesville Sister City Commission. All right, we also joined in the funding of shipment of medical supplies and toys that were donated by Charlottesville residents, facilitated by the Charlottesville Winneba Foundation. And we maintain very close relationships due to the efforts of the commission members and close relationships with the Charlottesville Winneba Foundation. And there's a photo on the left. You may recognize on the left photo, the gentleman to the right is Nana Gottlieb, and he's working with members of the city commission there. And on the right are some of the packages that received. There was quite a few more, but it was quite a load. I'm glad I did not have to carry it. Now, then we come to Huehuetenango, Guatemala, which is in our friendship city and exploratory stage. And it's an interesting city. It's different than any of the other ones we may have a relationship with. And we're still exploring the nature of our relationship. What are the things we can do with them? What are the things we cannot do with them? It has, and we'll be talking next month. I'm coming back to do a presentation on Huehue specifically with the recommendations as to what we do. So I won't touch too much on Huehue, except to say that we're working closely with a foundation called the Ixtantan Foundation here, who were the ones who initially suggested Huehue as a future sister city, and they help facilitate a lot of the activity. The second thing is also I went to Huehue in Guatemala back in February to meet on a trip organized by the mayor of Huehue. Now, I didn't expect it, but there was this, to get from the capital city to Huehue, there are two ways to get there, 200 miles. You can get into a bus and go around cliffs for 6 hours, or you can get into an 8-passenger puddle jumper. I chose the puddle jumper route. So I got there quickly, and so they didn't tell me that in Guatemala, they charge a ticket not just by your baggage weight, but by you and the bags. So with me, I had 200 extra pounds.
All that were in the bag.
That plus what was in the bag. But nonetheless, it was a fun trip. They presented me with all of the different attractions in Huehue. I learned a lot about the life. I learned a lot about the city. I learned a lot about what might be possible to do with them and what we should probably not do with them. We will be working with the commission at our first meeting in August to discuss these so that we can come up with a good recommendation as to how we should work with Huehuetenango. And I'm looking forward to that next month. Oh, on the left, little old me and the mayor of Huehue, Mayor Cano, who just won on the 25th of June re-election. And then on the right, at the Open Up Library, which had been closed for 2 years due to the pandemic as well as a shortage of funds. And so we sat there. I thought that we had long ceremonies here in America. Believe me, our ceremonies here are short compared to everyone at the table had their talk, and then they gave me the microphone. So I said, well, if they can talk for 20 minutes, why can't I? But we had a wonderful day. And there there I am at the end of the table. And of course, my new friends I met up in the mountains from Huehuetenango.
They're cute.
Those llamas?
Yes, yes. Which are not native, obviously, to Guatemala, but they are a good tourist attraction. So the results of the visit are what we're doing, we're reviewing, discussing. Because remember that when the decision was made to go with Huehue as a friendship city, that was 2 whole sets of commission people ago. The present set of commissioners have very little knowledge or had very little knowledge about what went into this process. So we, out of courtesy, are going to discuss that the first meeting in August to bring them up to speed so that when I come back to council to show you the recommendation, that the commissioners will totally be up to date as to what we're going to talk about, what we're going to recommend. Travel scholarships, we've been talking about them. We gave travel scholarships to individuals to go to Winneba, to go to Poggio, also to go to Besançon. The second one, the CERN program is a program that coincided with our trip to Besançon. CERN obviously is a center in Switzerland, so we went both to Besançon as well as to CERN with 23 young people from Charlottesville. And we did get some support to help make the trip from the Sister Cities Association. And we continue with our grant programs. We were able to have significant grants with people going to Sister Cities. However, we are taking a look at now, looking at some grants focused on bringing people here so that the citizens of Charlottesville can enjoy more of the results. We realize the fact that our citizens in Charlottesville do not have an awareness, as much of an awareness of the Sister City Commission as they need to have. They need to share in the benefits of the commission and the benefits of what we do. And so that's a new focus we want to make sure that we take on. So, in conclusion, with international travel, we'll continue our vital role in connecting the citizens of Charlottesville with those of the world, particularly Besançon, Huehuetenango, Poggio, and Winneba. And to move on to quickly possible next steps, I do wish to return in August to give you an update on Huehuetenango and what we think is the next step in our relationship. Also, I'm hoping that we do have, pardon me, coming up in about 2 weeks, the visit of a delegation from Winneba. There's about 8 people coming, the mayor of Winneba, and I think all of you, some of you have responded, you will be at the reception. And so I'll be also there, and we will be working with Dave Norris to make that painless, happy, fruitful week. All right. We would like to look at creating an annual Sister City Week. That's plans in the future within the next couple of years. Some way where we can involve the citizens of Charlottesville, but at the same time highlight our relationships, both food and music and other activities, to bring the Sister City organization, the results of the Sister City organization, to our people in Charlottesville. And we're starting to work on that. We'll be in our retreat in September. We will have an informal delegation, hopefully, from Huehuetenango, and that's part of the discussion the next month. So I won't talk too much about that, but they are chomping to come. I get phone calls about every week saying, when can we come? When can we come? But once again, there's preparation for some effort to go into place, so they can't simply just come without us discussing that. And we will talk more about that next month. We will have an informal delegation from Besançon in 2024. 2024 represents the 20th anniversary of us becoming friends. Also, we would like to have a delegation at some point in time to Huehuetenango in 2024, assuming that we move further in the relationship. I would like to mention that the delegation of Huehuetenango would be different than perhaps going to Besançon. It would be more of an organized travel group, moving as a group because of safety issues. It's a wonderful country, but once again, how we approach traveling in Guatemala is different than how we would approach traveling in France or in Spain. The last thing that I'd like to throw out is possibly doing a major delegation from here to Besançon in 2026 to mark the 20th anniversary of our partnership with them. And that's far enough out that we can figure out how we want to do it, if we want to do it, and who might like to participate. So it's not on immediate. With that being said, thank you so very much for that time. Do we have any questions? And I hope I didn't speak too quickly, but I would rather go quickly and not run out of time.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Herring. Folks have questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the process of the, I think the term was your friendly sister. So to determine if that partnership will work, what is that like? You just like courting each other? How do you do?
I guess it is. And a lot of it was courting at a distance because it was over Zoom. So
Yes.
It's kind of an interesting sort of situation. What we have to do is find out what were the original assumptions of the things that we could do. Now, the Spanish language is a big piece of that. The second one is the fact that Huehuetenango is the center of the Mayan civilization, which has impressive ruins. unfortunately, Wayward Chenango is also in the center of the path of migrants going from Central America to Mexico. So we have to look at both sides of that. We're trying to determine how would visit to Wayward Chenango, how would travel look? Under what forms would it take? And I think we have some options. We're looking at things like the school interchange. It is unlikely that for the foreseeable future that we would send our students to exchanges in Wayward Chenango. It would be a safety issue. But there are possibilities for teacher exchanges. There are possibilities for pen pal relationships, for Zoom relationships. So what we're trying to do is define what those possibilities are so that we are clear from the beginning that if we move forward in a relationship, what will be the foundation of the relationship, and that everyone is on board with that. So that's what we're hoping to be able to clarify. And once again, as you well know, working in a committee is not the easiest thing in the world, and but it's fun. And we want to come back and present an approach that everyone buys into, that defines for the council and for the city of Charlottesville, this is our relationship. This is the relationship we're trying to build with Wayward Chenango, to make sure we all have the right expectations. And that's what I'm hoping to present next month after our deliberation, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But I must admit, it was impressive to go. I'm not sure what I expected when I left here, but it was different.
Yes.
Sir.
So one quick follow-up. I forgot the country our relationship is now dormant with, but, yeah, that's right. Is there a capacity, like we can, for a city this size, that we, I don't know what that number is, but that number is too much. Are we at about right size now, or?
You mean in terms of the different relationships we have?
Yes, the different relationship with the different cities.
It totally depends. I think I have worked with cities that are our size that have 9 cities, just cities. And I have worked with one that only have 2 or 3. I think it depends upon what our desires are. We have an ability to do more with a smaller number of cities in terms of budget and traveling, and to be more selective with a smaller number of cities. And so I think we have about the right size right now. If we do not consider Bulgaria, I think we have the possibility for one more city. But once again, I think it's a city that should fit the needs of Charlottesville people as well as Charlottesville education. Now, I taught school at Charlottesville High School this past year, so and I taught French and German, and so I have a leaning towards German cities because I teach German.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and I do know that those are the 3 languages we teach in the school: that German, Spanish, and French. So I'm always pushing for, hey, let's balance that out. We have room in the city for 5. I wouldn't suggest more than 5. But 5, I think, would be very, very good. And 5 would be supportive of our language education programs that we have at Charlottesville High School.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions?
No other questions, just thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. I've always sort of wondered what
Yeah.
that group does,
You
and
and most of the residents of Charlottesville.
it's very interesting
Yeah.
and important. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for letting me come today. You all have a good day, and if you don't mind, we're going to leave.
Mr. Herring, I do have one other question.
Yes, sir.
for you.
I'm sorry. I was trying to get out.
It won't be long. It occurs to me that if we've got 4 sister cities, rather than trying to have, I mean, I don't know what you're planning or what the plans might look like for a sister cities week, but I wonder whether it might be better to have, let's say, 1 sister city recognized per week during a month.
Sir, all those variations are possible, and I agree with you. We will be talking about that during our retreat in September. How do we approach it? And I like the idea of having it spread out to a month. Let's say, for instance, October, just take it out of the Word of Sister City month, and we're gonna have visitors from Posio coming, and events and music events and food events during that week, and then another city maybe we could invite the next week. It would allow us to spread it out a little bit, instead of having one big week that's over and gone. No, that's an excellent idea, and I will make sure that's on the table as we discuss it, because but we do need to have something, we need to have something where we can bring the citizens of Charlottesville closer to the results of the Sister City Association. Thank you.
And I would also like to say I'm volunteering for the trip to Besançon.
Well, sir, I thank you very much.
We love your volunteering, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Herring, he's just laughing.
I speak some French, I speak no Spanish.
Well, you know, it's a.
This is
here, I'll
an excellent
take
learning
care of that.
opportunity. Thank
If there's nothing, anyone else have a question?
Mr. Herring, thank you for your presentation. I know several of your members on your commission, but I also know people that have gone to various sister cities. And so the type of work that you're doing to highlight Charlottesville and then bring that information back to us is very appreciative. And I'm very, very happy with all of the work whenever you travel that you do with the students.
Thank you so very much. But you know, once again, just to add, it's all about the youth. Everything we do for this city, everything we do for the sister city, is about the youth, young people in the next generation, and preparing them and educating them and opening their eyes. And it's something I enjoy doing very, very much. If there are no other questions, I thank you for inviting me to come today, and I shall see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Okay, so second presentation of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, Mr. Engel.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here, and we're here to present the Economic Development Strategic Plan. This is, you had an update about a month ago from Stephen, who's with us today again from Resonance Consultancy, and I'll let David pull up the presentation there. And in the meantime, I want to say thank you to the members of the steering committee. This project was guided by 16-member steering committee made up of community, nonprofit, small business, larger business, education, representatives. We also had significant stakeholder engagement through a 3-day kind of charrette process in this room that totaled about just upwards of 80. Many of you were part of those 3 days as well. And then we had a significant survey component that had business as well as community respondents, totaling about 300 responses there. So we did have some engagement. So I wanted to mention that and thank the steering committee in particular, who met multiple times on that. Also, thanks to Mr. Rogers for initiating this work when he came a little over a year ago, and realizing that this might actually be his last council engagement and meeting with you all. It's appropriate that we end with the plan. So with that, I'd like to introduce Stephen Pedigo. He's the lead with Resonance Consultancy and has led this work, and he's going to walk through the presentation. Stephen?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be back with you. Good to be back in Charlottesville. No pressure, since this is Mr. Rogers' last meeting. I'll try to do my best to live up to expectations. So what I thought we would do today is, I think Chris said I have about 20 minutes with you all, and then I'll open some time up for questions as well. So what we'll do is talk a little bit about the project, hit on some of the key phases and the things that we did, and then quickly just go back and refresh ourselves on the research that we did for the project and remind ourselves about some of the key learnings. But then spend most of our time in the strategy piece of this, kind of outlining some of the strategy. You'll have an opportunity to talk goals and action steps and metrics and things to that effect. So that's the plan for today. So just as a reminder, we spent as Chris alluded in his comments, we spent a fairly significant amount of time getting to this final document, really sort of set over 4 phases. Sort of phase 1 was really where we outlined out the project with our steering committee. Phase 2 and 3 were our discovery sections, particularly the phase 2 where we're doing much of the analytic work and the research work around that in phase 3. Supported by much of the public engagement that we did actually in this room with the community, along with some community stakeholder engagement. And then finally have spent a good amount of time actually developing the strategy, but working back and forth with Chris and team and the steering committee to think about an action and implementation plan and how we want to measure impact. So as a sort of overview of the discovery, so one, I think you all have had this in your packet, but one of the things we've also made available as part of this report is a fairly detailed research appendix report. So if you're wanting to know more about the demographics or economic assets or challenges that we sort of learned throughout our work with you all, that's all available. It's about 100 and some odd pages. It's great bedtime, nighttime reading to work yourself through. But I'll try to summarize some of that key work as we go through this. As part of our analytics, we did kind of at 3 pieces. Again, benchmarking, looking at how we looked and compared Charlottesville to our peer cities and our peer communities, obviously, and in its context to the Commonwealth as well. We did some industry cluster work, trying to really have a clear sense of what were some of the target sectors as it related to investment in Charlottesville. And this, I think, was really helpful work to really clarify what were some of the key opportunities and strengths. And then a piece of that, which I think is somewhat interesting and new to the analysis of what we've done for brought to Charlottesville, is we did some career pathway analysis. So you'll notice in the plan, we're not just talking about an economic development strategy that's just built upon company attraction and traditional, what I call economic development kind of 101, kind of an old school fundamental pieces of economic development. We did, in the strategy, there's a good emphasis, I think, on community entrepreneurship, wealth creation, but also skill development for residents as well. So as part of that work was fundamentally supported by doing some career pathway analysis for some of our sectors. So for instance, we looked at healthcare to really have a clear understanding that if someone's starting in a healthcare entry wage opportunity, how do they kind of work themselves up the food chain, so to speak, and what opportunities does that create in terms of our industry sector work? In addition to that, you all are already doing a comprehensive planning process, but we did some look at some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we face in sort of the commercial landscape space here in Charlottesville. And we wanted to, you don't want to make industry recommendations if you can't support them with in the commercial space around them. For instance, you want to make sure that your economic development strategy and your land use strategy are somewhat married. So we did some analytics behind that to support that work. And then, as Chris mentioned, there was a fair amount of engagement, and I think for a community your size, quite robust. 16-member steering committee. We had over, I think, about 85 participants in roundtable discussions over 2 days, and then had nearly 300 people participate in our community survey. So lots of engagement as it related to kind of providing insights to that report. And in fact, one of the things I would say is that as you look at the strategy and look at the, particularly around the strategies, but also the priorities and implementation, a lot of that work gets very much informed by those discussions that you have, because that's how you understand who your community partners are and how you match up the things that the city wants to accomplish with what your partners are already doing or wanting to advance in the field. So with that, I'll give a really quick overview of the research. I won't hit on this in much detail because we've walked this path before together, but I'll hit over sort of 10 of the key highlights really quickly. First and foremost, I think you all will know, Charlottesville is a very diverse town. It's a young town. It's got a great community charm. About a third of the residents in Charlottesville are BIPOC residents, and in fact, you'll see that in the plan we've put an emphasis on the BIPOC community, particularly around entrepreneurship as it relates to skill acquisition and thinking about how we track that over time and much of the metrics that we're putting forth in this plan. So very much a foundation for that. So we're a very young town and a diverse town as well. An extremely educated community. Charlottesville, like its peers, like its other college town peers, extremely educated. In fact, when you look at the number of residents that have a sort of a bachelor's degree or higher or tied to the knowledge base occupations, Charlottesville is about 72% higher than the U.S. average. So again, a lot of folks that are highly educated participating in a knowledge-based economy. And then when you look at the basic metrics of the community, particularly as it relates to labor participation rates, how productive the workforce is, unemployment, all of those things are very much trending in the right direction, particularly as we come out of the past few years of the pandemic. Thirdly, Competitive export sectors, a strong foundation base. You'll see that these sectors, real strengths in defense, life sciences is a real opportunity here. Tourism as well, but also even the clean technology sector. And what I think is what we learned, and in fact, we're working with a couple other communities and have pointed to y'all as an expert, as kind of a mid-sized city that have done a really nice job around life sciences and actually your clean technology with some of your consortiums here, and Chris being able to create those opportunities and working with them. Fourthly, we think that life sciences is an opportunity, as is clean technology. Partly, if you just look at the landscape of first and foremost, what's happening with the investment that UVA is making in this space, as well as your CIVO BioHub group. But if we look at even thinking about the opportunity around clean technology, the fact that there is billions of dollars being invested by the Biden administration, particularly with the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, that creates a lot of opportunity for communities that are thinking about clean technology. And so there's an opportunity to connect both those federal dollars as it relates to some of our export sectors as well. Great asset in the University of Virginia. We want to think about how that partnership is even strengthened even more. I think what we appreciated about that work is that that UVA was represented on our steering committee and present at many of our engagements, and very much centered as an anchor institution and wanting to think about the economic development strategy. I think one of the things that you'll see as it relates to the plan is that we have put an emphasis on this idea of inclusive Charlottesville as it ties to innovation. A lot of communities sort of divorce the two. We have actually put an emphasis on really marrying the two, thinking about how we continue to address some of the inclusivity challenges that we face as it relates to building a more inclusive Charlottesville. And in fact, this is becoming a more and more important element of the work that we as economic developers do in our space and how we connect the two. And I think there's some great opportunity here over the next 4 or 5 years as we implement this plan to have impact in that space. A very growing, diverse entrepreneurial community. I think when you looked at the folks that participated in our roundtable discussions, as we look at the data as well, there is a large number of folks that are engaged in entrepreneurship, a very diverse entrepreneurship community from not only just our demographics, but from industry, both from what we suggest as being sort of export-based driven, which is kind of your sort of regional industry sectors, but also your small traditional small business base here, fairly robust and fairly strong as well. We think that there's an opportunity to really bridge equity divides with some of the some workforce development practices. You'll see that's on front and center in one of our goals and our strategy, and really used a lot of the work that we did in the pathway analysis to think about how we connect the two. It's not just enough to have an innovative-based sort of industry sector, but how do you create pathways and opportunity for residents to fully participate in that through new training programs, through new career pathways as well, and we've included that as a part of our plan. That said, there's a lot of great things happening in Charlottesville, but generally speaking, the economic development story is fairly somewhat untold here. There's a lot of best practices here. There's a lot of opportunity. And we do a great job on the DMO or the destination management or visitor side, but wanting to do that same work around economic development. I know Chris is making one of his newer hires his updated hires having a piece of this in terms of being able to complete that storytelling piece, and you'll see that's part of our plan as well. And then finally, there's a lot of great quality of place assets here. You've got the downtown mall, you've got the assets that a college town brings. The continue thinking about how we can marry that and thinking about sort of the 2.0 versions of that around placemaking strategies is something that is important to that. So with that, I won't hit on this very quickly, but these are the kind of the target sectors. This is in the report as well as in your deck. But one of the things I think you can see, and if you follow through the report, we've outlined strengths and assets and opportunities, both specializations and challenges, and within that report have highlighted particular sectors within those industry clusters that really set us up for opportunity. But again, thinking about life sciences, IT technology, financial services, defense, tourism, and clean tech, of kind of that core group of industries. That's super important for when someone says, what drives the Charlottesville economy? You can start, you have the elevator pitch to say, well, we're a place of life sciences, we're a place of clean technology, we've got a robust tourism sector as well. You now have that elevator's pitch that allows us to really have clear sort of messaging around that, but also as a way to really track business and investment over time. We now can start to figure out which of these sectors are emerging, how do we bring these folks together, and you can create some real synergies through the business recruitment and expansion efforts that Chris and team will do as well. So that brings us to the strategy. And so, we've devised this strategy based off of sort of 4 areas. There's obviously a vision statement, what's going to be our ultimate guide. How do we think about what are our big overarching goals to the strategy, to the economic development strategy? What are our desired outcomes? How do we activate on them in terms of our strategies? And then our action steps. And I'll hit on 1, 2, 3 pretty with each of these, and we'll kind of move through the action steps pretty quickly. But we wanted to include them where you can see what we think is a fairly robust plan. So, vision statement, culture and creative capital, Virginia, Charlottesville treasures its people and diversity, a leader in innovation and sustainability, again, thinking about people first and really putting in the storefront windows, so to speak, this commitment to diversity, commitment to innovation, and a commitment to this idea of sustainability and resiliency. And you'll see that as it works through through the strategy. To support that, we've built, I think, a really economic development strategy that really, in a sense, represents where I believe economic development is today. And Chris and I were talking about this this afternoon because we're geeks over where kind of development has come today. And if you think about economic development, it has really kind of went through kind of 3 phases of work, right? Phase sort of economic development 101 was really centered around sort of company attraction and retention in traditional business development. And sort of phase 2 of economic development being really centered around a lot around people attraction, quality of place development, many of the things that y'all have done here. But then sort of that 3rd phase of economic development is how do you marry business attraction, talent attraction with this idea of complete community building, right? Thinking about creating opportunities for all of your residents and businesses. And I seem to believe that this strategy really does that. So goal 1 is really around equitable entrepreneurship, investing in entrepreneurship to grow a more diverse, equitable, and vibrant Charlottesville. I know that when we had our session, we were challenged to think about community wealth building and an opportunity for wealth creation. We think we're going to accomplish much of that through our support around equitable entrepreneurship. I'll talk more about that as we go through the plan. Our second goal is really thinking about how we support intentional growth, so building out an innovative economy, one that really thinks about growth, but is intentional about the types of partnerships and opportunities that we're creating, and really remembering that if we're wanting to build a real more inclusive community, that not all job creation is equal, right? That focused job creation on the jobs that are creating family supporting or household supporting or sustainable, however you want to define that in that space, is super important. So having intentionality around that. Goal 3 is really focusing a lot around focusing on the individual, pathways for opportunity, creating skill development. So creating pathways of opportunity for all Charlottesville residents. You'll see that there's much discussion about expanding some of the current programming you're doing, but also some new innovative work with other partners throughout the city as well. 4th is considering doing what Charlottesville has had a real storied history on, and that's thinking about placemaking, investing in placemaking to continue to celebrate who we are as a community. And then 5 is somewhat, I think, new for Charlottesville in a bit, and that is just being very clear about positioning and telling our story and how we want to be in a community that's open for investment. So those are kind of the 5 goals, and if you can imagine, as I said before, kind of the evolution of where development is, we're kind of hitting on all three of those phases. So why equitable entrepreneurship? So we're going to invest in equitable entrepreneurship to develop a more diverse, vibrant Charlottesville. Much of the literature has suggested in the space that this is an opportunity where, if done right and doing very targeted, you can create community wealth in your community, particularly for underserved businesses, as well as thinking about how you can tie your entrepreneurship development to your quote unquote traded sector work as well. So it's a real opportunity to grow a community from the ground up or from the bottom up, so to speak. How do we envision doing that? So we've outlined in the plan 7 strategies to do that. And by the way, in the plan and in the implementation plan, you'll notice that we've outlined what's the responsibility of the city, how the city's working with partners as well, and being very clear about who's on deck to do what, and as well as phasing this over time so it's not happening all in year 1, so to speak. Chris has got a small team. He's not going to implement this entire economic development strategy on. It's going to require partnerships and other organizations, connections with the county and others to do some of this as well. So strategy 1.1, growing Charlottesville's BIPOC and diverse businesses through technical training and capital access. 1.2 is about thinking about how we ensure that we're creating a one-stop resource. 1.3 is really around thinking about support for home-based businesses and the support for that for remote work. 1.4 is continuing to do your business equity fund that's been quite loan fund that's been quite successful. 1.5 is thinking about subsidized commercial space in the downtown and downtown. 1.6 is continuing to partner with community support organizations and program funding to accomplish a lot of the things that are already happening in the entrepreneurial space. And then strategy 1.7 is thinking through how we promote and tell the story of diverse entrepreneurship in Charlottesville.
So as you move on, just a note, maybe something for Jay and us as counselors, that the 1.3 where they talked about the home ox, the other night when we were having the zoning discussion, this came up a lot, about what that would look like. So.
Yeah, so to that end, one of the things you'll see, and I won't go through all of these because it's quite detailed, but you'll see we've outlined action steps of how this happens over time and what we should be doing, as well as the partners and things. So it's an implementation plan that's available through this as well, as it relates to each of these areas. So questions around metrics are important, and one of the things that we've done in the plan is outline both a series of what we're going to call sort of in-process metrics to understand how we're implementing the plan, and then I'll share with you at the end what's a success story about how do we know that we've deemed some success, and what are those metrics that we want to follow and track throughout the time. But things that we'll be tracking and that we're interested in, and our team has kind of set Chris and team up with a fairly good KPI metrics, ability to kind of track these metrics, but looking at business formation, the number of businesses are participating in our programs, how we're spending our capital dollars, and the types of entrepreneurs that we're promoting and how we're promoting them as some of the recommended metrics as we sort of process through this strategy over time. So goal 2 is about supporting our sort of innovation-based economy. I'd say this is a very somewhat of a traditional economic development goal. It's what you would want to find in any city's economic development strategy. You're kind of thinking about how you attract investment and what's the plan for that investment, as well as how do you really leverage relationships that you currently have. So, you don't want to build a business attraction plan that always just looks outside of the city. You want a business attraction plan that looks inside the city as well, right? That builds those relationships through business recruitment and expansion. So to that end, you'll see that we've outlined there's 7 sort of strategies behind this goal as well. So executing on a business retention program, how do you, that's that visitation that you do all the time with your businesses, but being a bit more systematic in the way that we do that, using that as an opportunity to understand opportunities and challenges. What opportunities are they seeing in the marketplace as it relates to Charlottesville becomes a very important sort of business intelligence collection opportunity for us as well. 2.2 is continuing to leverage all of the relationships in the Commonwealth, as well as our regional partners and our partnership with the county as well, to think about how we're attracting that investment strategy as it relates to decision makers. 2.3 is around continuing to build out the connection to all of those to the industry associations that we have here, particularly focused around the two that we know are quite successful, which is the life sciences and the clean technology sector. 2.4 is aligning our redevelopment and our planning policies. So that's where, city staff and Chris and your planning team, making sure that we're aligned in our economic development, our planning interests. 2.5 is continuing our Seville Match program. 2.6 is continuing to think about how do we continue to strengthen those relationships with our anchors and our county partners. And then 2.7 is that if there is publicly available land or opportunities to build public-private partnerships or community land banking and those types of things, how do we can use that to continue to support diverse jobs, investment in housing options as we want to address investment in the community. So you see some of the actions. I'll skip through these pretty quickly. So that gets us to the metrics. My apologies. I am not driving this thing very good. There we go. Metrics to look at are around business invested, the types of businesses, jobs created, how we're supporting that Seville Match program, and then the types of site selectors that we're engaged with. Now, goal 3 is really another opportunity for closing our equity gap, and I think this is going to be not completely new work for the city, but an expanded array of portfolio of work with partners to really create those pathway opportunities. Again, thinking about how we create opportunity in what we know are those innovative sectors, as well as thinking about how we can think about career pathways for residents in Charlottesville. And so in this strategy, there's sort of eight pieces that are attached to this, all supported through some of that work that we did around career pipeline, a sector analysis. 3.1 is about the development of our getting private sector companies really engaged in our workforce development, continuing to do that. That's, again, why that business visitation piece becomes super important. You can connect the dots. 3.2 is putting a real focus on learn and earn. You would typically maybe have traditional old school language would be apprenticeship, but earn and learn being a new way of thinking about workforce development, and particularly connecting that with our tech-based sectors of tech and IT sec and life sciences, and thinking about through what that looks like. 3.3 is in collaboration is expanding and thinking about a new Go healthcare program. Again, we've done all the analytics that have looked at how you can create pipelines from beginning in healthcare all the way up to more and more credentialed healthcare opportunities. So an opportunity with Chris and team and partners to think about that. The Go Cook program, expanding that to have a bit more of an entrepreneurial piece to that, not just about training people in the food and restaurant space, but thinking about the wealth creation opportunities there. Partnering with Charlottesville school districts to think about K through 14 programming, expanding the programs around our Go hiring program, so encouraging our companies and our businesses to really support the development of underserved residents and entrepreneurs. Thinking about leadership opportunities as it relates to BIPOC residents and up-and-coming leaders. And then obviously 3.8 is that you already have a housing plan and a comprehensive plan that are outlined in priorities. We want to make sure that those are indicated in our economic development strategy, as well as it's about creating the necessary wraparound services for residents to be successful. So that's what Goal 3 is centered around. To do that, in terms of measuring impact for that or measuring progress, we're going to be looking at a lot of different metrics here: participants in programs, looking at how our population of share of residents, our income of residents look like, educational rates, poverty rates, median earning rates, homeownership rates for all different residents throughout the city as well. So it gets us to Goal 4. Which is around placemaking and building out on our destination assets. Obviously, we all want to live in a great place that's great, that attracts and retains talent. Through that, we want to continue to support a lot of the great efforts that are already in way, particularly the reimagining of downtown, the historic downtown mall, Thinking about community welcoming initiative. How do we really promote and how do we engage our business community around supporting Charlottesville as a great place to live and work and thrive? And one of the best practices that we outline in the report is really looking at some of the things like a place like Greenville, South Carolina has done around making that as a real key element of its economic development plan. Supporting the Young Professional Program in Charlottesville. We talked about this with folks, young professionals that were in town. It was represented in our discovery work, but also with the chamber, and that is how do we continue to ensure that there's opportunities for people that want to stick around after they finish up at UVA and really make a commitment and connection to the community. And a lot of that could be through volunteerism, through just being able to create that social cohesion, that sort of social connection that's capitalism that's important as well. 4.4 is supporting the efforts of Visit Charlottesville, already a robust partner. Chris is obviously a key element in that work. And then 4.5, we included parking because it's part of Chris's portfolio and it's a key piece of placemaking as well. So then that gets us finally, how do we think about metrics around this, visitation, placemaker events, how we're thinking about investments that we see. And then that gets us to our final goal, which is really around storytelling and really positioning the place for investment. And, you know, economic development 101 is that marketing communications and telling your story is a fundamentally important piece of that work. To do that, we've got to make we've got to make some investments there. We've got to, build out the identity for that, which is what Strategy 5.1 says. We got to create the promotional materials to do that. We've got to have the technology base to continue to support our infrastructure. So a lot of the things that you may see and that we've talked about, for instance, in Goal 1 to Goal 2 to Goal 3, is about tracking of data and tracking of investment and opportunity. And so you got to have the infrastructure to do that. So there's investment that needs to be made for there. And then finally, 5.4 is once you're doing all the work, there's got to be an ongoing communication of a drumbeat that you're doing this work, not only with y'all as policymakers, but also with residents and businesses that are living and working in Charlottesville as well. Again, metrics, thinking about traditional comms metrics, as well as how we're engaging with that. So, over 5 years, ideally, one of the things that we want to be able to do is track some metrics to tell us a little bit about the vibrancy of our community. And obviously, if we think about our goals, we want to ensure that we are a vibrant community that's continuing to have an attractiveness to it in terms of residents and talent. We want to make sure that we're a place that's seeing investment coming in. You don't want to be some communities that are bleeding employment, right? That are losing employment, that are losing firm formation. You want to be able to track that over time. And then we want to think about how we're also kind of, in a sense, representing opportunities for all of our residents, right? And so thinking about educational skill opportunities, as well as some measuring through income, as well as some traditional metrics of wealth generation. And so as you can see, these are metrics that we're suggesting over time to follow throughout, and we've offered Chris a baseline of these metrics, but we'll track these over the course of 5 years as we're implementing the plan. So everything from, our population development to how we're thinking about business formation, the employment that's engaged with that by sector and by cluster. How does that relate to our median household income, and how does that cut across residents of different ages, different income levels, but also different ethnic and racial backgrounds, and then overall some general sort of wealth creation, generational community wealth creation opportunities, looking at household ownership, median earnings, poverty rates, and those types of things. And these are metrics that we would hope that as you're implementing this plan over time, along with the process metrics that we outlined in the plan, you start to see some success. Now, I want to caution us to say that one of the things that's the reason you capture these metrics over the course of the implementation of the plan, but will we see significant change in year 1 to year 2? Probably not. It's going to take some time. These are metrics that are long lagging indicators. They're not indicators that change over time, which is why we want to make sure that we're also measuring some of the process metrics that we've outlined in part of the plan as well. So with that, I'll summarize. I'll just leave that here on the back on the end, at the end, just to give you a sense of, again, what we're doing. Equitable entrepreneurship, really focusing on innovative growth, creating career pathways, placemaking and investment, and for a community your size. And I would say this is a robust strategy that's going to require Chris and team, but also really strong partnerships throughout the region and throughout the community through your nonprofit partners, your entrepreneurship partners to really create this plan. I think one of the things what's exciting about this plan is that the stakeholder group is represented by a diverse group, and many of those partner organizations can see their work connecting back to the efforts that the city's doing. And I think that's a win-win for the city. So with that, I'm happy to stop and take your questions, and hopefully I haven't been too long-winded. So.
Thank you. Questions, council?
I thank you for the presentation and for the report. It looks very thorough and well laid out and a great plan. I guess, Mr. Engel, I'm wondering for you, what does, now that you have this great plan, what are your thoughts about, how you go get the work done? I mean, is it kind of thing where you come back to us every quarter or 6 months to sort of tell us how things are going, or is there a portal or something where you'll be keeping up with all of this? And
I think all of the above. I think Stephen said robust. I would say ambitious. So it's a little daunting. We're a small office. We have
it's a lot.
Three folks working on economic development efforts at the moment. We have 2 open positions, so we hope to get those filled and have some more oars in the water, so to speak. But so there's the metrics piece, and I think there's probably at least we do an annual report currently, and I think we would expect to continue that, and it would follow the format of what you see here in terms of reporting back annually at the very least. But this information is on our website now and will continue to be going forward as we make progress.
What's the usual sort of time frame in terms of how often these are updated? Is it every 5 years, every 3 years?
Yeah, this is a 5-year plan, so we would imagine within 5 years, towards the end of 5 years, we would start to revisit and update. And it's stated in the plan. This is simply a plan. It's a lot of words on paper. It can change, and over the last few years, we can see reasons for why things might change. Pandemics and things of that nature cause shock to a system. So it can certainly change. It can change as soon as we get going. We don't expect it would immediately, but there's certainly room in there for elements of it to change over the 5 years, but it's intended to be a 5-year.
Yeah. Best practice for the EDA is every 5 years. Some communities will do a 3-year plan. Like I live in Austin, Texas, a community that's adding 50,000 people a year to our community. It's changed. They've updated their plan every 18 months, frankly, because it's changed dramatically different. But the best practice standard is every 5 years.
Okay. And I guess your colleagues at the university and the county and the region, you all get together on a semi-frequent basis to compare notes about how our plan stacks up to theirs and how we can work well together.
We do engage regularly, regionally, and in particular, the county and city work pretty closely together along with the university. We all share aspects of our plans, and whenever somebody does a new one, people want to check it out to see what they might be missing or what they could potentially partner on. So yes, many of our partners were engaged in the process, and others will be further engaged now that it's done.
Thank you.
I'd also just say I think there's great alignment between what y'all are doing here and the county is doing as well. I mean, I think there's a lot of synergy between the two plans. In terms of, the county had previously updated their economic development strategy. This plan, I think, is a great companion piece to that and doing things differently than what the county would do, but also complementary to some of the things there as well. Particularly, for instance, a lot of emphasis on our plan in terms of entrepreneurship as well as skill creation, which I think is a nice complement to some of the sort of green, quote-unquote, greenfield attraction that the county would do.
So I had a couple of comments. As far as community partners, ironically, I took a tour of the Housing Authority today, Crescent Halls, and they will certainly be open to being partners with that. They'll have some great kitchen space that that they, once the dust settles, that they'll be open for incubator businesses and things like that. So we have a lot of community partners that we can work with. And also as far as the businesses, our community partners, the Chamber Policy Committee, which I sit on, they, it was a county rep and big businesses and small businesses where they talk about, collaborative efforts. So I'm not sure if that was included in there, but that is another space, Chris, that I think a lot of these type of things are talked about. There's two things you mentioned during your presentation that I just want a little bit delve into a little bit deeper. One is that the untold stories, and I think that goes to when you say that we have some untold stories, and I think that we understand that, and we're trying to get that PR person for the city because we are doing some incredible things, but we just don't have the capacity right now to really to put it out in a methodical type of way, all the great things that the city is doing. And another thing, you say you want to reimagine us as more inclusive. So what did you mean by that again? I mean, I know what it means, but what are we not doing, or what are we doing, or what more could we be doing in that space?
Yeah, I think what I want to do is, I think a lot of times, so communities will think about inclusivity work and economic development work and think about them separately. And one of the things that I think about in this space is trying to think about how we reimagine them together, right? So rather, if Chris is doing small business work and doing talent attraction, skill-based work, it should have a lens towards inclusion. We shouldn't be thinking about it in terms of church and state, so to speak. A lot of communities have approached particularly a lot of the efforts around DEI with sort of two separate departments, for instance. But a lot of the things that Chris is doing already in the space, particularly around his small business work, that's an opportunity to create greater emphasis on inclusion, right? If we're having a lens towards that. Same thing with skill-based training programs, right? And so for me, I guess, when I think about how you tell an economic development story today and you kind of position a plan forward, it's not just about investment in, just to create all, this idea of just all jobs, create opportunity for everyone, but it's being very intentional about how you measure those two together. So that's my mind. When I'm thinking about the reimagining of this, it's really about just communicating it together to say that we're addressing these issues, which I think a lot of that work you're already doing. This plan just puts an emphasis on that, maybe more so, perhaps.
Yeah, it's communicating, it's getting the word out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, a few questions. One, if you were to try to summarize what in terms of policy actions and budget allocations would change over the next 5 years as a result of this strategy that were not occurring over the past 5 years?
Chris, you want to take that? You can go first. I haven't followed your budget. Well, I think a couple things. One is I think that I'm not sure that it's I don't think it's, first of all, foremost, I don't know that there's new resources that are being advocated. I don't think Chris is asking for any new resources with this plan. But I do think that there is some orientation work that maybe has changed here. One, I think greater emphasis already on sort of the opportunity around entrepreneurship and using that as a lens for wealth creation. I think, too, you would see in this plan, if you looked back at previous work, a greater emphasis around skill development and partnerships around skill development. So those, to me, are probably the two policy changes. I think the sharpness about now being able to say we have a clear understanding of who we are as an economic development portfolio in the city, I think is something that we have really brought to this plan. When we first started the work with Chris and team, there was not a lot of analytics around how you measure your business portfolio or how do you think about, what are those skill pathways and how we want to get there to them. I think now what we've brought to that is some analytics to really support that work. So I don't know that there's a ton of quote unquote policy change as it is from you all as a policy making body, but there is, I think, changes in terms of the team and its partners, right? Because again, you're a very small economic development team, right? For the size of your city, you have 5 people doing economic development. That's super size small, right? So Chris relies on his partners to do that. And so I think the biggest change for this is what we've said is, broadly speaking, we're creating a bigger tent for economic development in this plan. And because we've created a bigger tent, you can see more of your community partners tying to that work in a way that hasn't been able to do. So I think that's probably what I would say is the biggest change, is that we've pitched a bigger tent for economic development than we have in the past, and we're asking a lot of our partners to come and join us in that party, so to speak.
I think what I would add is internally, we are, as one of the goals talks about storytelling, internally, we are seeking to strengthen our ability to do that. We have an open position right now that we incorporated some of these elements for marketing communications. We've not been strong in that. We haven't had a focus on that. So we're looking for a skill set in somebody to bring that to the table so we can do better at it in conjunction with the city's communication efforts, which are also being hired for as well. So I think that's a different perspective that we have in terms of how we're looking at how we're filling at least one position so that we can do better in terms of how we tell that story. We've never, honestly, we just never been good at that, and we haven't spent a lot of time and put a lot of resources towards telling the story. It's more towards, all right, let's do a program or let's help a business, but we've not really leveraged that ongoing. One of the elements that was up there was trying to identify kind of our brand, and we're going to have a decision to make internally if we undertake that solo as a city economic development effort, which is an option, probably the easier option, or whether we, do a partnership with and try and get comfortable with the county and create a joint message, or the Visitors Bureau, or something like that. There may be more points to leverage if we go with a partner, but it may be harder to kind of get there. So that's something we've never really done. We created a logo for economic development several years ago. We haven't really done much with it then, and we certainly don't do any advertising. We don't do any real marketing. I don't think we're going to jump into that in a huge way, but I think kind of creating a way to tell our story locally and regionally, we need to fine-tune that a little bit and get better at that. And having somebody with a little bit of a skill set in that area is going to help. And then we're going to have to think through the next pieces of it.
Partly because your peer communities across the Commonwealth are doing that, right? And so, not to say that you're a peer community, but with Lynchburg, Virginia, it's a client of ours. They have really invested in this space of being able to tell their story in terms of marketing and comms in a different way, particularly because they're wanting to try to hold on of all the talent that they have in those around their universities. They are a brain drain community unlike you, right? So they are facing the opportunities of doing some of that investment and sort of telling that story. Richmond is another example of that, where there's been real, if you look at the communication and comms efforts around economic development comparatively to that versus Northern Virginia. Arlington's another good example of that, where places have invested that space. I think you all are doing all that work. It's time to kind of tell that story as well. So I would say maybe that is a policy and resource change, perhaps.
And you mentioned partnerships many times. Did you identify any key top partnerships that don't already exist that you would be looking to prioritize building over the next 5 years, whether that be with the Housing Authority, community development corporations, land trusts, et cetera?
Do you want to talk about? That's probably your wheelhouse.
Yeah. I mean, we have a number of key existing partnerships. I think there are additional ones that we have that we would lean in on, like the Community Investment Collaborative. We've done a fair amount of work with them. The Business Equity Fund was mentioned. They hold that fund on our behalf. They are continuing to grow their skill set and get more into the economic development space based on small business growth. So that's an area where I think we would see a little bit more activity. There are others. The city, county, university, the regional group, the state group are certainly key. But there are other local ones like CIC comes to mind. The Housing Authority comes to mind. Piedmont Housing Alliance, we're doing some work with them. They're doing some kind of financial self-sufficiency training and home ownership things that kind of nudge up to what we're doing. So I see, you know, PHA and
I
CIC
think
certainly as key
KTEC
partners.
too, you
Yeah.
may have mentioned that.
That's great.
KTEC.
KTEC is an opportunity. There's transition there, but obviously they and Piedmont, they were on our steering committee represented. So both of those are certainly key partners. I should also mention the United Way. I mean, they've done new and different work in the last few years, and we have partnered with them on the Envision grant along with the county. So that is a grant to businesses that is out there, and I think they want to continue to do that type of work, so they will likely be an ongoing, growing partner.
And was there any, obviously, the Economic Development Authority has bonding authority, which only the City Council and Housing Authority have, which is a pretty unique, important power. Was there any discussion of utilizing that power in a more expansive or creative way over the next 5 years?
Not specifically. The authority is aware of the plan. They're getting a briefing on it. We'll have a discussion about their potential roles actually later this week. But the bonding piece, not so much, not yet. That is an option that authorities have. We typically use that in terms of industrial revenue bonds, which are essentially conduits for tax-exempt status on business or nonprofit bank loans. That's the traditional method that we use there. We have not done our own bonds like the city does. Of course, we don't have taxing authority, so that's part of the reason for that. So nothing specific regarding bonding in our current EDA.
And the final question, you made reference to community wealth building, and you felt that the entrepreneurial piece was sufficient to cover that. What was the rationale for why a community wealth building strategy would be fully encompassed within that?
Well, I think I think that there's a lot of things, so there's a lot of pieces that are happening in the community. So to just say that it's all about entrepreneurship and community wealth creation, I think that's one piece element of this. I think the other element to the work that's in this is around skill development as well. And when you look at traditional community wealth building pieces, there are kind of three pieces of that typically happen, right? Typically is one around entrepreneurship, two around the idea of skill development, and three around sort of the home ownership piece, right? The idea of home ownership. It feels it's I think from Chris and connection with the steering community and others, there's organizations around town that are doing a lot of work around the idea of home ownership and the development of home ownership. It felt to us, I think, when you look at the plan, that there was enough community partners in that space doing that work on behalf of the city. And frankly, I think that it's just a resource standpoint as well, right? You're a community that has 5 folks doing economic development. And so you have to be strategic about how you spend your time and where you think you can move the needle. We know that we've got strong partners in, goals 1 and 3. And from an economic development team and the expertise around that, that's what we think we can move the needle on. I think around the housing piece, particularly, there's a lot of community partners. You've outlined some of them today. There's an opportunity for thinking about land trust and land banks and all those organizations that can do more of that work in partnership, frankly, with you all as a policy body, and less with perhaps a staff-driven economic development organization.
Yeah, and just final thoughts. I think there's a lot of good things in this plan. This is not a new concern I've raised, but I'll raise it again. My concern is still, I think we need to still be more explicit about how the very real positive things, university being here, being a knowledge economy, are creating the externalities of having a poverty rate double the state and national average, one of the lowest levels of economic mobility, and that if we're really going to confront that, economic development has to break out of a silo, engage with other departments, and really have a community wealth building strategy like other localities are taking on, that is looking at not anything that you mentioned as bad, just building on it additionally in terms of how does it connect with land trust, co-ops, community development corporations. And perhaps it's not fair to put all that on this one plan, because that is way beyond even just one department. But my concern is that as a city, we need to get here, and I'm not seeing, or I suppose believing, that this plan is going to take us to that point.
I mean, you and I, we can disagree on that a bit, maybe. I think that you have a housing plan that is, again, that takes some of that considerations into that, and I think that that some of your nonprofit partners are doing that. I think a lot of it depends on how you view the vehicle for for achieving that success. So there are some communities that have brought that in-house completely and sort of run that from a city operated space. Last time we had a conversation, you mentioned Burlington as an example, or Richmond that have taken that on. We can look at both of those communities and see that perhaps they actually haven't moved the needle as much as they thought they would by taking that into consideration. Whereas there are other places across the country that have done this in a partnership manner, right, in terms of thinking about wealth creation in a partnership, working with its nonprofit organizations and others to do that. I think of places, recent example of that's done really good work in that space is Boston, for instance, particularly under the United Way and the Boston Foundation. They've done that in a completely divorced role than the city leading those efforts. I think they've been pretty successful in that. So I think it all depends on how you view, who's on bat to do that. Is it a consortium of organizations, or is it should it and does it have to be city-based led? Now, some of the policy work I think can be city-based led. You've got a housing rewrite that's going. You've got a housing plan. You have a rewrite of your land use code. I think those are documents which can, as policymakers, can lean into to create that environment. But I think it depends on. There's many approaches to doing that, and I think this approach to this by doing new innovative work around entrepreneurship in the plan, as well as some of the skill development work with the idea of making a real commitment to track these metrics, I think is actually advancing the conversation around wealth creation in the community that you all haven't had in the past.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, a question I had was alluded to earlier. With the zoning rewrite that we're doing right now, is there any sense that you have that there is something in particular that we ought to be doing with the zoning rewrite that we're either not planning to do or that you would like to emphasize as being a particularly good thing with the idea of economic development planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think the continued commitment to, I think that you all are placing an emphasis on this idea of mixed use. I think you want to continue to have that presence there. I think in terms of, when you look at the industries that are Charlottesville, for instance, you're not taking big pieces of it. You don't have a lot of land availability, first and foremost. Secondly, you are not a community that's doing a lot of what I would traditionally call industrial-based development, right? In terms of you're not a Lynchburg, Virginia, for instance, where you've got pieces of land and you're trying to marry up that work. So I would say that continuing, I think, to think about some of the density things, the work that you're doing, the question of mixed use. Those all are important principles, and we outlined that in our real estate analysis as well. I think the thing that is about economic development in Charlottesville, which will continue to be, I think, who you are as a community, is really about the growth and expansion of businesses that you have in your space and in your community. It's not about attracting the big whale or the big fish outside of Charlottesville. And so as much as you can do to support the needs of those businesses is important. I think the thing that came up over and over and over as it relates to land use, and particularly zoning, as it related to the engagement work that we did, it was about the need to continue to make the process more clear and easier to follow, and the permitting process, et cetera. It's about reducing the barriers to entry, so to speak. That's where most of the effort and most of the conversation we had with stakeholders really centered around this space. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I would add that I think we need to continue to be strategic about where we do investments, and I'll use the Beacon project, which you all are familiar with, as an example in terms of that's going to be sticky. It's not going to go anywhere once it gets built, if it gets built in the city, and then it will have an ongoing impact in generating opportunity for new businesses in the food space, as well as entrepreneurship in the food space. So we need to continue to do things like that with the realization that the market is pushing kind of some of the industrial land. It's already, it's bound to go away. And we've seen that. It's going to continue to happen. The market's driving higher and more intense uses, largely residential, not always. We've seen some office space for sure. But some areas we're going to continue to lose what has traditionally been commercial or business use to another use. And we can fight against that, or we can realize that that's going to happen to some extent and then be strategic about investing in things that aren't going to move as easily. And, we hope that Beacon is a long-term, project that'll stick around, but we need others like that'll be here. And I think secondarily, we need to be open to partnerships, realizing that we're 10 square miles and our neighboring county is 720. So we partner with them, we talk with them, we share ideas, and we do things, but, we don't have a joint industrial park or business park, for example. Not that we're ready for that or that they are, but that's an idea that's been out there, and some communities do that. So we need to be creative about those ideas with the realization that our 10 square miles are pretty well spoken for and are going to be more highly developed, most likely residentially in most cases, going forward, just based upon the way the market's moving.
Well,
That's
and
fair.
I mean, I would hope that as clearly over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, we've been emphasizing housing above most other forms of land use. One of my concerns, which I've articulated a couple different times, is that I think that if we convert all of our land to housing and have no primary economic activity, we lose, relatively speaking, sales taxes, we lose meals taxes, we lose lodging taxes, we lose B-poll receipts. Charlottesville is fortunate in that right now only about 44% of our budget comes from real estate property taxes, and only about half of that probably is from residential real estate taxes. So as opposed to some counties immediately surrounding us where that number is not 44%, but it's 70 or 80%, when there is an economic downturn and when people have to start scrounging around for money, in those places, the only place they have to look at is real estate property taxes, whereas here we're not as adversely affected in that respect. And so I think a sound economy is a diversified economy, including a fair amount of commercial activity. And I hope that we will make sure that we have in Charlottesville some places that we are still holding on to as potential commercial developments, rather than submit to the temptation to go put another 50-unit apartment building on top of something. So,
Agreed.
I would agree, and I would suggest that if you are thinking about, so for instance, if there is large-scale conversion of any industrial commercial space to residential, I mean, I would put forth that would encourage you as a policymaking body is to task yourself to go out and do an employment lands look at that, right? What is it going to look like? What's going to be the impact of that on everything that you've just described? We're working in Gilbert, Arizona right now, doing the same similar strategic planning process now, and this is a front and center issue that their council is very much debating back and forth, is the pressure of residential development, but also the need to protect commercial space. And so one of the things that we've been doing with them is, in addition to the strategic planning work, is an employment lands look, asking ourselves, and the sort of question is, what's the employment opportunity won or lost, and what's the tax implications of this, or the revenue implications for this as we make those policy decisions. So I encourage you as you go through that work to do that type of analytics for sure.
questions, anybody else?
The only other thing I would add is when Mr. Sanders, his inaugural speech to the group here, spoke about Charlottesville's story and wanting to do a better job telling that story and reclaiming that narrative. It sounds like you're wanting to do something similar in specifically having to do around economic development. I'm just hoping those can all be married up. I see the piece that you're trying to do is really the global, more overarching, and what you're doing is supporting, but they're both important. And I absolutely agree. We need to be able to tell our story in a more proactive way where we own it and, you know, we own the bad parts and the good parts. And going forward, you know, we have an agency in how that's communicated to the world. And so sounds like there's some staff that you might need with part of that. And this is the kind of thing that for me as an engineer, I'm like, I have no idea how you would pull that off, but it is important. Yeah, thank you.
I would agree, and I would say that the city hasn't spent any time or energy on its story, its brand, its narrative. Some cities spend a lot of time and energy on that. We've had other things that have intervened and not allowed us to do that. And, you know, the business card logo is the city seal, which I don't know how many years old that is, but it's been around a long time. And it doesn't really tell the story as an example of I think, what we want to say in terms of our city as a place to live and work. And so that whole effort can dovetail nicely with the business piece and the business identity and economic development story if done collectively. So there is opportunity there, and you know, maybe we'll endeavor to do such, and that would certainly require support from the council in terms of some dollars to that, which hasn't been done previously. So that may be a future opportunity.
And I'd say the cities that do it really effectively are the ones that do it together, right?
Sure.
Where you don't create these two brands and two identities. You want to create a unified identity, and there's a lot of best practices to do with that. Even thinking about the extension of that even into how you position yourself as a place to live, a place to visit. So just destination identity is important.
Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So that finishes up our 4 o'clock agenda. Next item for us is to go into closed session so that we can discuss and interview some candidates for some boards and commissions. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I have that here.
Okay.
Pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code, I hereby move that City Council convene a closed meeting as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1 for the following: discussion and consideration of prospective candidates for appointment to the Planning Commission, and 2, discussion, consideration, and interviews of prospective candidates for appointment to the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Council is now in closed session. We will return at 6:30. For those who are joining by Zoom, there will be a separate and different link for the 6:30 meeting. See you all in an hour. Thank you.